This is a hot wire foam cutter that I made for making displacers for low temperature differential Stirling engines. The displacer that you want to create is going to be very thin, very light. This weighs just a fraction of an ounce, and it's a 1/4 inch thick of styrofoam. And using the hot wire cutter, I was able to cut it from a 2-inch block of insulation foam that I got at the hardware store. So the basic process that I went through to make the hot wire foam cutter was I created a bow out of scrap lumber, put a couple of nuts and bolts in here to give me a way to fasten the wire down, and you can see the cutter wire is going across the front. It's set in a notch here so that it doesn't move. For the cutting wire, I ordered this off of Amazon. This is Woodland Science foam cutter replacement wire. This is nichrome wire. I've seen other YouTubers who have done this with a guitar string. I haven't tried a guitar string yet. This is actually quite a bit finer than a guitar string, and it's nichrome. It's actually made for this purpose, so I think it's going to work pretty well. The other thing that I have done, I've then wired this in to just an old pigtail and went to a Lionel train transformer that I happen to have in the closet. And I like the idea of the train transformer because that lets you vary the voltages that are going to be going out, so you can modify the temperature, and you'll know that you'll probably end up with something that's going to get hot enough to actually cut your foam. I created some spacers, and these are paired, and each one is, or each pair is a different thickness. So this is how I determine how thick of a cut I'm going to be making in my foam. So you pick a pair of spacers and you place those under the cutting wire. And now your cutting wire is held exactly this distance. In this case, it's a 1/4 inch above the work surface. So then we just heat up the cutting wire by applying voltage. And when we do, we can see that the cutter actually gets a little slack because the heat causes it to expand and get a little bit longer. But I just slowly push the foam through the cutter. And this one, see, got a little ragged there because I paused a couple of times. But if I keep even, steady pressure, it cuts nice and straight. Even though the wire has lengthened a little bit, it's not going to be a problem because the direction that I'm cutting is not causing that sag in the wire to affect the thickness of the cut. So as you can see now, I'm getting a much flatter, even surface on my foam. You can see that the cutter wire now is a little bit relaxed because the heat has caused it to lengthen. There are some people with their cutters, they've actually created a spring mechanism that's included with it so that it'll keep tension on the wire the whole time so that you don't end up with that problem. It actually starts out a little bit quick and then it slows down because the way I have this transformer set up, it's just enough current to keep it hot enough to cut. So it gets a little bit warm while it's sitting idle between cuts. It's getting a little thinner now, you can see, and I'm getting these 1/4 inch blocks. You can also take this mechanism and you could turn it 90 degrees so that the wire was vertical, and then you can clamp it to the edge of the table and you can use it to cut different shapes out of the foam. Now if I wanted to make a thinner piece, I would just change my spacers to the thinner spacer. Put that thinner spacer on there, and now it's going to cut to whatever the height of those spacers is. I always start with a piece of foam that's going to be a little bit bigger than what I need for my finished product. Looks like I can get maybe one more piece out of this before I get into that mylar. And there you go. I'll turn the voltage off. It causes the wire to cool, and you can see it immediately goes taut. So I ended up with some nice, very thin pieces. If you're making displacer pistons out of the styrofoam, it works best if you make a hot wire cut on both surfaces. If you only cut one side and you leave the other side with the factory surface, it may have a tendency to cause it to bend and warp over time. And there you have it. It's a simple hot wire foam cutter, and it'll be a real handy tool for cutting down foam and making those displacer pistons for the low temperature differential Stirling engines.